This is our league, and this is your league. From the 55-yard line on CFL America Radio and the Sports History Network.
Canadian football is a magic show, a century-old spectacle, grown men battling to cross a line drawn in the dirt. It is a game filled with heroes, great players and great teams, bringing championship pride to their faithful fans. The field is a battleground where skill and determination are the tools of the trade. It is a game that has grabbed the nation by the heart. An annual struggle becomes an epic battle as teams fight for the ultimate glory, the chance to hold the Grey Cup and become forever known as a champion. For more than a century, Winnipeg has been a home to Canadian football. While teams may have presented an air of sophistication, the early days of football in Manitoba were known more for bone-crunching collisions on prairie fields, and the stars of the day were both athletes and brawlers. Winnipeg won the West's first Grey Cup in 1935 when they marched into Hamilton and defeated the powerful Hamilton Tigers, with the incredible Fritzie Hansen, the West's first superstar, leading the charge. In 1950, the Bombers challenged the Argonauts at Toronto's Varsity Stadium in a Grey Cup game forever known as the Mud Bowl.
The Mud Bowl game was one of the great disasters in the CFL. What happened, of course, is that we had a sudden snowstorm on the night before the game, and then it started to melt. And what we ended up with was slush. It was the most deplorable conditions that you could ever think of. So bad that one of the Winnipeg players, Buddy Tinsley, he fell down face down in the water, and the referee, Heck Crichton, turned him over. Or poor old Tinsley might have drowned. But in any event, Winnipeg had Indian Jack Jacobs, and we thought they had a great passing attack. We never found out because they couldn't throw the ball, and the Argos were able to win it.
Although he never brought the Bombers a Grey Cup, Indian Jack Jacobs' spectacular passing made him a fan favorite. In 1953, Jacobs had a new target, an all-star from the NFL's Philadelphia Eagles, Harry Bud Grant.
I arrived in Winnipeg as a player in 1953, and I remember going to the first practice, and we went out to Assiniboine Park to practice because our practice field was wet or underwater or something. And I got out there, and I never saw so many people. We had a hard time practicing because there were so many people there to watch practice.
There was never a question as to the Bombers' popularity. Football was practically a way of life, especially if your father was the legendary voice of the Bombers, Cactus Jack Wells.
As a kid growing up in Winnipeg, everybody was a Blue Bomber fan, and when your father was the voice of the Blue Bombers, you were an even bigger fan. But living in Winnipeg and growing up with a father who was the voice of the football team, it was pretty easy to be absolutely taken by what went on.
In Winnipeg, the Bombers were always front-page news. In 1957, the top story was 29-year-old Bud Grant's transition from player to head coach.
In his time, Bud Grant was the greatest student of the game of Canadian football that there was. And I mean, it proved that with the success he had, knowing what it took to create a win.
Grant promptly installed a bold new offense known as the wing T and recruited the perfect quarterback to run it, University of Iowa star Kenny Payne.
I had the opportunity to come here because of what Bud Grant, as a new coach, wanted as an offense, and he felt I would fit as a offensive quarterback. And actually, the Canadian football game was made for this particular offense.
I figured that the wing T, as we called it at that time, was the way to be successful up here. Well, Payne, of course, was the best at it that there was.
I can remember the first play I called. I ran for about 12, 13 yards for a first down, and the stadium went crazy. I guess they had never seen a running quarterback in this league on Winnipeg's team anyway.
Quarterbacks make headlines because linemen make blocks. In 1958, Grant signed another wing T specialist from the University of Iowa, future Hall of Famer Frank Rigney.
He was probably the perfect individual to fit in with the Canadian boys because he could move, run with them, do everything you needed to do in the wing T offense.
I really, really loved football and wanted to know and understand every play. And I wanted to understand it from every position of the offensive players. I knew exactly what the quarterback was trying to do, what the receivers were trying to do, and it helped me do my job against people who are sometimes quite difficult to block.
In the late 1950s, Bud Grant and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers enjoyed the luxury of two equally talented quarterbacks, Kenny Payne and Jim Van Pelt.
Jim Van Pelt and Kenny Payne shared the quarterbacking duties for the Blue Bombers. When they weren't quarterbacking the team, they could also play other positions. The two quarterback system could drive a lot of teams crazy because you could send both of them out onto the field and you never really knew which one was going to be the quarterback.
In the mid-50s, a tip from a writer who heard it from a railroad porter brought the Bombers a running back from Lincoln College in Missouri, the great Leo Lewis.
Leo Lewis is the greatest player I ever had. The greatest player, no question about it. He could do everything. He had instincts of a natural football player. He could block, he could run, he could catch. He played every minute of every down of every game. He was, without a doubt, in my mind, the best player I've ever been associated with on a football field.
In 1958, with Van Pelt at quarterback and Payne at defensive halfback, Bud Grant's wing T offense paid off, and Winnipeg celebrated a thrilling 35-28 Grey Cup win over Hamilton.
If you ask me what was the greatest thrill I've had in sports or athletics, winning that Grey Cup in Vancouver probably is the ultimate in terms of what it meant to me, because it justified everything I'd done, and I'd been here and coaching and playing and whatnot, and now I feel I was somewhat fulfilled. Probably gave me as much satisfaction as anything I've ever done in sports.
We had the biggest homecoming I think a team has ever had. It was sub-zero temperatures. People were lined up on the street from the airport all the way over to the arena.
Nobody cared when we had our parade and it was 30 below zero, and you couldn't drink out of the Grey Cup because your lips would be frozen to it. But the town turned out, there was thousands and tens of thousands of people lining Portage Avenue to welcome us back.
5 times in 6 years, the Bombers met the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the Grey Cup final. The Bombers won 4. But none more dramatic than in 1961, when quarterback Kenny Payne twisted his way into the end zone to record the first overtime win in Grey Cup history.
Kenny Payne knew how to win football games. He knew what to do, and I think that he and Coach Grant meshed immensely well in preparing offensively to play other teams.
Bud Grant knew what he was doing when he picked up a guy like that, and I think that he was just one of the stalwarts with the football club there, and certainly one of the great players ever to play in this league.
Fans expected another exciting battle when they poured into Toronto for the Bombers Ticats Grey Cup in 1962. Instead, they got what came to be known as the greatest game we never saw, the Fog Bowl.
ABC was going to televise the game in the States for the first time, prime time national television. Now, the advantage to that was, of course, exposure, which helps in our recruiting of players. And I thought, well, this is going to be great. Then the fog comes in.
It soon became a game of running plays. Passes and punts went up and disappeared. Finally, with less than 10 minutes to go and the Bombers up by 1, Commissioner Sid Halter called a timeout.
We went into the dressing room, sat there working on strategy of what we were going to call and what we were going to do, and we came back on the field only to find out they came in and said the game had been called. Too much fog, they were going to come back the next morning.
We had, from then until the next day, to call the next play. It's the longest I ever had to think about a play. We had a meeting that night, we had a meeting in the morning, we had a meeting in the locker room, we come out in the field, warmed up, and got ready to call the play. I still wasn't sure what we're going to run.
It was tough. After playing a full season and almost a full game the day before, to play the next morning, to put tape back on to your raw skin and try to get stretched back out from the Charlie horses and the contact if you had the previous day. There were a number of players that couldn't even suit up.
They need never have bothered to finish the game. When the teams returned to the field, no points were scored, and the Bombers hoisted their 4th Grey Cup in 5 years. In 1965, the Ticats got a chance for revenge as Toronto hosted a windblown Grey Cup that would leave Bomber fans second-guessing Bud Grant.
If you've ever been in that stadium, you know in Toronto that the wind howls down there, and to throw the ball against the wind or to kick the ball was almost an impossible endeavor.
Facing the strong winds, punting proved futile. 3 times when the Bombers found themselves pinned deep in their own zone, Grant elected to concede a 2-point safety touch in order to retain possession of the ball.
Bud Grant made very, very few bad decisions as far as I was concerned during the 9 years that I played under him, and certainly giving up those safety touches in no way was incorrect. We just couldn't move the ball, and Hamilton couldn't either, but we lost by those 6 points.
While the Winnipeg Blue Bombers struggled through much of the 70s, the team did find their share of stars. 1974 saw the arrival of a quarterback who could throw like none other, Ralph Dieter Brock.
When I talk about my favorite Blue Bombers, I have to start with Dieter Brock, Ralph Dieter Brock. I'm a lover of pure passers in football. He was your classic drop-back quarterback. I loved watching Dieter Brock throw the football because he threw it unlike anybody that I've seen in the CFL.
While Brock made headlines, there was little fanfare in 1980 when an unheralded kicker arrived for training camp. Based on his track record, no one could have guessed that Bob Cameron would be on the roster for the next 2 decades.
I was drafted in the 1st round by Edmonton, and I thought, geez, I'm just going to be able to make the next step to the pros, and that'll be it, and I'll have a long career. And I got to Edmonton, and 1st round pick, and I was the first cut. And so it went from there to Calgary Stampeders, tried out there, was cut again. In 1978, tried out for Philadelphia Eagles, was cut there. Went to Ottawa Rough Riders, was cut there. Hamilton Ticats, cut there. Back to university for one last year. And then I tried out for Buffalo Bills the next year. Cut again. And basically I thought my career was over until Winnipeg phoned me in the fall of '79 and asked me if they wanted to come out in the spring. And it was sort of embarrassing when you've tried out that many times and never even played it down until your 4th year of trying out, but I wasn't willing to give it up.
Successful football teams need both character and characters. The Bombers found both in one hulking package, the unfriendly giant, Chris Walby.
Chris Walby should have been a defensive player. And the reason why I say that is because defensive people have attitude. They're supposed to have attitude. You're supposed to be nasty and have a nasty attitude. And Chris Walby was the only offensive lineman I had seen in my playing time and in my coaching time that has an attitude like that. I mean, like, he used to be downright nasty and mean.
Every week, you have to peak at a certain time and turn ultra aggressive to basically look to destroy and maim the player you're playing against and knock the snot out of somebody across from me. You know, and that was what I lived for.
In 1983, quarterback Dieter Brock staged a one-man strike in an attempt to get his release to play in the United States. Instead, the Bombers sent him east to Hamilton in a swap for quarterback Tom Clements.
Tom had the ability to really use his weapons, and that means handing the ball off, dump passes, little screen passes, misdirection, and what Tommy could really do well was surgically take you apart.
I've never played with a guy that was who I thought had such a grasp of the game as Tom Clements. He was a surgeon on the football field. He just could do so many things, and he had defenses just reeling. They didn't know if it was going to be a run, a pass, play action, a side out, a hitch pass. He just did everything he had to do.
The trade set up a storybook 1984 Grey Cup. The Ticats and Brock versus the Bombers and Clements. But it was no contest. Winnipeg's defense mauled their ex-teammate, and the Bombers ran away with the game 47-17.
Winning the Grey Cup, grabbing a hold of that thing, for a Canadian kid, this is the pinnacle. I mean, for me as a football player, you can't imagine how, even though I think I was 30 years old at the time, this was something I dreamed of my whole life.
It was such a wonderful, wonderful, unbelievable feeling. This is something that everybody plays for. And to be able to hold it, and knowing that on those little silver-plated name tags of the teams, where every player on that team is etched in that thing for life, we were going to be there. I was going to be a piece of this traveling showcase. It was unbelievable. It was just the greatest feeling in the world.
In 1987, the Montreal Alouettes folded, and the league needed to realign the conferences. Winnipeg was suddenly an Eastern city.
Everything we did was Western Conference. I mean, all our rivalries were Western Conference. We were losing all that. You know, there was Edmonton and Calgary, and then we had a great rivalry going with BC too, and Labor Day with Saskatchewan and whatnot. And you're giving all that up.
The fans hated it that we were in the Eastern Conference. We'd build up these huge rivalries all the way through. I know as players, we thought the Eastern Conference was always the weakest conference, at least it had been for a number of years. And we thought, boy, if we go to the Eastern Conference, we're going to be in the Grey Cup every year.
And the Blue Bombers did win the Grey Cup in 1988, beating the BC Lions on a late interception and little else but the toe of Bob Cameron.
The 1988 game in Ottawa was a game that we won without any offense. We had one offensive running first down in the whole game. Completed 2 passes in the second half. Bob Cameron was sensational.
It was an extremely windy day. I fortunately had a pretty darn good game punting, and I guess it was a big factor in us winning the game. When you win by 1 point, then you can really look to the kicking game, and I was fortunate enough to win the Outstanding Canadian.
East or West, every Grey Cup win is a triumph. As Bob Cameron basked in the glory of victory, he added yet another chapter to his already unique CFL resume.
My contract was a lot different than most. We got the odd perk. Most guys would ask for a perk, ask for a car during the season, or ask for a house to live in, or put up an apartment or whatever. And I asked for lumber from a lumber store so that I could build my rental houses or build additions onto my own house.
He comes to practice, he's got drywall dust all over him because he rebuilds homes and fixes up all these places he buys. He's got screws in his pocket, he's got electrical cords hanging off his belt. I swear, he only played football so he could shower.
In 1990, Coach Mike Riley and the Bombers were back in the Grey Cup against Edmonton. With quarterback Tom Burgess dissecting the Eskimos' defense, Winnipeg romped to a 50-11 victory. The jubilant Bombers celebrated their second Grey Cup championship under head coach Mike Riley.
To go into the locker room afterwards and see guys that excited. Me being a rookie wasn't sure exactly what this meant to all the players of the CFL. And just to see the looks in the guys and the veterans' eyes, just the way that they were admiring that trophy and knowing that it's their trophy, it was very, I guess that's when it really hit. This is what everybody plays for.
Nothing in the world beats winning a Grey Cup. Nothing. No matter what you do and no matter what kind of high you think you're getting on, nothing beats it than winning a championship ring.
After one more season in Winnipeg, quarterback Tom Burgess was gone. And suddenly, the Bombers had themselves a problem.
The Bombers, after the 91 season, were in desperate need of a quarterback. And Cal Murphy decided that he needed to go out and get a marquee quarterback. And wouldn't you know that Matt Dunnigan was on the market. And it didn't take him very long before he had the city eating out of his hand.
If Matt walked into the locker room and he sauntered and he had his cocky, abrasive brashness about him, we're going to win. We were going to win that football game. I don't care who we're playing. We're going to win. Matt is a very cocky quarterback. He knows how good he is, and he can get the job done.
I was a warrior, and you know, I don't have a problem saying it. I was a warrior, and I was a SOB to play with, you know. And I was like, whatever it took, I was going to get the job done. And when you started something, you gave it your best effort. And anything else was not acceptable.
But the Dunnigan signing was suddenly overshadowed by a blow that rocked Winnipeg. Coach Cal Murphy's heart problems had worsened. He would require a transplant.
I remember going to the hospital in Winnipeg and taking game plans to Cal, and he's laying there virtually on his deathbed, you know, waiting for something to come through, and we're going over game plans because it's what we love to do.
When I had the transplant, to me, it was just another step in life, and the doctors there assured me there's no reason why I shouldn't carry on doing what I'm doing. Right after the transplant, they had me up and walking. It's pretty good.
In 1994, quarterback Matt Dunnigan recorded a performance like none other. As the Bombers faced the Edmonton Eskimos, Dunnigan put on the greatest aerial display in CFL history, throwing for an amazing 713 yards.
Matt could have had more. I mean, he missed a couple. And just missed, you know, and just those almost passes, you know, when the fans go ooh instead of boo. Well, if he had had those, I think he might have hit 800.
While Matt Dunnigan and Coach Cal Murphy would move on, new eras bring new stars and rekindled hope. As a new generation looks on, their heroes in Bomber Blue are back where they belong, in the Western Conference, battling for the right to raise the Grey Cup again, to write yet another chapter in the CFL's illustrious history.
We've got a great team. I think it's growing in the right direction. I think we're smart. We got good owners for a change. I think that the fan base has come back up. The TV's ratings are gone up. I only look for positive things from this league.